Welcome everybody to this first session. It's a little bit odd. I'm a giraffe conservation person by trade, and in general we love cats. Not. So we've got three speakers today, all very interesting, all coming from a diverse background in cat biology, conservation, ecology. Hopefully one of them will join us throughout the morning. Rob? Anyone? Mueller? No. So anyway, we're going to get started. And first we've got Kathryn Williams here from the Cape Leopard Trust. She's the Director of Conservation and Research. Fascinating background. I personally have followed Cape Leopard Trust for many years to see their work and see it expand across literally just their back doorstep right here in South Africa. So excited to have Katie and look forward to hearing you talk.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And for those of you who aren't local, welcome to the Cape. We're really excited to have you here. And from my perspective, I'm really excited to introduce you to the Western Cape's last remaining apex predator, which is the leopard. Here we go. Oh. No, other way. There we go. So there's our leopard of the Cape. We're really lucky to still have leopards in this part of the country. A lot of the other large carnivores no longer live here. You'll find them in other parts of South Africa, but unfortunately not in this part of the world. But we still have the Cape leopard here, and our organization, the Cape Leopard Trust, is a small NGO that works to facilitate and protect biological diversity, and we use leopards as a flagship species to do that. And our organization has three pillars to our work. So we have a research component, a conservation component, and an education component. And these pillars very much work hand in hand. So they drive each other and support each other. And we have a number of different projects underneath each one of these pillars. So today I'm going to share, first of all, a little bit about our focal species here, the leopard, and then I'm going to move on to exploring how we utilize these three pillars and some of the strategies that we employ to do effective conservation for leopards. Okay, so first of all, we're primarily working in the Western Cape of South Africa. We do have a project now in the Eastern Cape as well, but we're very lucky to be working in the Cape Floral Kingdom. So this is the smallest of the world's floral kingdoms. It has incredible diversity of plant species, and many of them are endemic as well. So it's a super rich biodiversity hotspot that we're working in. And the leopards that exist still in the Cape are a little bit different than leopards that you might find in other parts of South Africa. So here in the Fynbos, the leopards here are on average about 50% smaller in mass than those you'll find further north in the savanna biome. So our males are about 35 kgs on average down here, while if you head further north, you'll get males that are more like 61 kgs. Another key difference is that the leopards found down here have absolutely massive home ranges. So the size of the home ranges here can be up to 10 times larger for leopards in the Cape than other parts of the country. So it's really important within our conservation strategies to think about ensuring that the land that these leopards need persists and is protected and is also connected as well, so that they don't remain isolated or end up being stuck on islands and not being able to connect with each other. So we're doing a lot of landscape level connectivity modeling and corridor mapping at the moment. We're also very involved in monitoring the population density of leopards in the Cape and tracking changes in the population trends over time as well. So I've handpicked a few of our recent publications on population density that we've done through camera trapping in different areas of the Cape. And for those of you who are familiar with leopards, you might notice that these densities are actually quite low. So you'll see that the estimates that we've generated recently range from about 0.64 leopards in the Overberg. So that's, whoops, it's not what was supposed to happen? Oh. Sorry. Okay. Technical issues. But the Overberg is the point at the southern tip of Africa. It is where the southernmost population of leopards persists, And the densities we have generated there are about 0.64 leopards per 100 square kilometers. So this is actually really, really low. And our population estimates from further north, so up towards the Cedarburg mountain range and Piketberg are higher, but not much higher. So more like 1.5 to 2, almost 2 leopards per 100 square kilometers. And if you compare this to leopards in other parts of the country, you will realize how low our densities really are. So if, for example, you head to Sabi Sands in Kruger, you'll find leopards at more like 12 leopards per 100 square kilometers there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about one of our surveys and use it as an example of how we employ certain strategies across much of our work, actually. So one of our key elements to our work is to collaborate. So we are a very small organization. There's only 11 of us, and we're working over quite a large area. And as with many NGOs, we have limitations in terms of resources. So one of the things that we found has really worked well for us is to collaborate with other credible conservation partners within the landscape to achieve our goals. And this is something we do across most of our projects. So just to give an example in terms of the camera trap work that we do, our surveys are very, very large. So this is the Overberg survey, that one at the southern tip of Africa. And this survey spanned about 3,500 square kilometers and utilized 86 paired camera trap stations. So it's an absolutely massive area for our very small research staff to get around to and service regularly. And we do find that we also have to run our camera trap surveys slightly longer than other leopard surveys in other parts of Africa as well, because our leopards occur at such low densities. We need to make sure we get enough recaptures for the spatially explicit capture-recapture analysis. So we do run them for longer periods as well, which can put additional strain on our resources in terms of getting around them. So what we often do when we run camera trap surveys is we take on a local conservation implementation partner who comes on board with us. We train them in our protocols and how to service our cameras. We really upskill their staff and their knowledge as well. By using this approach, they also get a better look at what's happening on their land or in their region, and they're able to help support us in terms of facilitating, servicing all of these many cameras. So for this particular survey, we had 2 implementation partners, Nuvia's Wetlands Special Management Area and Walker Bay Fynbos Conservancy. And these collaborations can also bring other sort of almost unexpected but amazing benefits as well. So when we partner with these organizations, it's not just about working together to get the job done. It's also about sharing knowledge. And when we work together to share information that we've all gathered, we can find things that you certainly wouldn't have found if you were working alone. So we brought together the knowledge from our 2 implementation partners in the Overberg, plus some knowledge from Panthera, who's also sampled nearby, in terms of which leopards they had seen in the area in previous camera trap surveys in De Hoop, or just ad hoc cameras that had been in the landscape. And from sort of collating all this data and comparing it against ours, we were able to identify 3 different individuals, male leopards, and pick out movement patterns that we certainly would never have been able to see if we worked alone. So just to very quickly look at one of them, AM9, who's the blue one, was first photographed as a young male in 2018 by one of the partners, and then was seen by another partner 2 years later, about 90 kilometers to the east. And this revelation really came from communicating. And that's really helped us to understand the fact that even though this is an extremely fragmented landscape, which you can see if you look at the map there, you can see how much farmland's there, leopards are still able to disperse across there, and it really reiterates how important protecting corridors are in this landscape. Across all of our work as well, we find it very important to find technology that can really aid us in our methods. So when we do these surveys, we end up generating a huge amount of photos. So this particular survey, we got about 230,000 photos that needed sorting through. And within that, we had to ID all of the leopards individually as well for the analysis. And so we bring on AI programs that can really facilitate our ability to do this more effectively and more accurately as well. So in terms of species ID, we work with a program called Wild ID. And we're able to upload our data to Wild ID, and the program has been trained to identify different species within the fynbos and further afield as well. And they apply a automatic labeling to all of the pictures, which does require a human element to go and check and make sure that it's accurate. But once we have done that, once we've checked accuracy, we're able to export a data sheet, essentially, which gives us all the information about where all the different species were seen at what time. And is another tool. So we work with African Carnivore Wildbook, which is an online program that's free to use, and they have amazing tools for a number of different species. But their pattern recognition software for leopards helps us to get a first look at which individuals match, and then we're able to basically go from there and finish getting our output files for spatially explicit capture recapture. And so through all of these efforts, through our collaboration, through our work with technology, we're able to yield results in terms of how many leopards we find in the landscapes that we are modeling, and then we can go back and resample them in future years. But what I think is really important to say is that for us, camera traps and the work that we do isn't just about getting a scientific result that can be published. It's also about conservation, and it's about education as well. So we really believe in taking all of our camera trap images and taking them that little bit extra further in terms of inspiring conservation, inspiring the local communities to care about them. So a few examples, again, from the same survey, but we often apply this across much of our work, is that within this survey, we created information signboards that went across the landscape for people to learn about leopards and also about western leopard toads. This was a joint project with EWT, and we utilized camera trap photos with that. We also did public presentations to private landowners within a identified leopard movement corridor in this region to really inform them about the importance of the biodiversity they have on their land, and start the process towards hopefully working on biodiversity stewardship agreements with them to protect this corridor. We always use camera traps in our education work with schools and young people on camps, showing them the images we found and also getting them hands-on with cameras, having them learn how to use them, and being inspired about going down a conservation career, we hope. And then finally, within this Overberg landscape, we also identified that roadkill was a serious threat for some of the species in the area. And with our data and EWT's amphibian data, we utilized that knowledge to inspire conservation and put up road signs in important hotspot locations on the roads. And I just want to finally mention that I think this is a nice little story, is that when we did do these road signs recently, we took our camera trap photos. So this is one of our Overberg leopards, AM12, and we actually turned them into the pictures that went out on the roads in the territories where he actually walks. So that when this sign goes up, it's not just about warning people they need to slow down and be aware of wildlife near there. It's also about telling a story about who the individual who walks in your landscape is and why you should care about him, and engaging with landowners a little bit more about their landscape. So that's a little bit about us. We do a lot more than that. So please do catch myself or my two colleagues at some point today, and do check out our website to find out more about the Cape Leopard Trust. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Katie, very much. What we're going to do with all of those who just came, we'll go through three talks. I'm going to invite Rob up next. Rob is from Panthera, Regional Coordinator for Wildlife Crime in Southeast Asia. Nice to meet you, Rob. I'm Julian. G'day, how's it going? Lots of people here, obviously very interested, and I think your slides are straight up. Cool. You got initiation by fire.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry, I thought I was in the Marine Suite for some reason. So that's a dash over. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here and good to meet you all. I'm going to go straight into this talk, give you a bit of an overview, first of all, of the situation of tigers and where we are at now currently. So it's still pretty dire. We've passed a point of it being more critical, I'd say, but the latest IUCN assessment that was conducted last year states that overall the population, the global population of wild tigers is declining. So all of the the red in this map was the historic range. What we're left with now are these little pockets of green where we know that tigers now currently exist. And we now have much better quality estimates of the total population size, which is 4,500 tigers in the wild, of which there's just over 3,000 that are mature adults. And when you look at the pattern, the distribution across Asia, you see that 75% of them occurred exclusively within South Asia. So India, Nepal, and Bhutan are really important for them. And part of that is due to the fact that protection there has been very effective, but also because of the fact that the landscape can naturally hold much higher densities. You have rich grasslands which can raise terrific numbers of tiger prey. Very different situation in Southeast Asia, where you have jungle, very little primary vegetation on the forest floor, and so you don't get the same density of tiger prey. And what we've been seeing, particularly since early 2000s, if not before, it's been this sort of wave of expanding extinctions emanating out from Vietnam and China, these market destination countries. And so tigers have steadily been knocked out of Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and they're now sort of heavily threatened, particularly in Thailand and Malaysia. So we view this is really the frontier of tiger conservation, Southeast Asia. But when you look within this massive red, there's over 1 million kilometers squared of habitat which is currently empty. So there's terrific recovery potential. So the way Panthera works in tiger recovery is by implementing this Tigers Forever protocol, which was developed in partnership with WCS. And it's simple, but it works quite well as a guiding set of principles. So first of all, we fix on key sites where you have a breeding population of females, where you can actually achieve recovery. So we're not interested in sites that are already saturated or near carrying capacity. We're looking at sites where we can achieve at least a 50% recovery in the population. And then there's a process of identifying what the key threats are. Invariably, the top few are going to be targeted killing of tigers for body parts or retaliation, with then killing of prey following shortly after that. And then we attempt to reduce those key threats. And on Saturday, Andrew and I will be talking about one of the ways in which we go about doing this by using a problem-oriented approach to really razor down those specific problems, understand them in depth, and then apply targeted interventions to reduce them. And critical to this protocol then is the fact that we regularly measure those tiger populations and attempt to create what we call a source population, where we create this island of breeding females that can then push out dispersing tigers into the surrounding landscape and connect to sink populations. And then we connect these populations through protected corridors. But the main focus is really at the site level. And we've seen in a number of sites some terrific successes, trebling of tiger numbers in Parsa and Manas. In other sites, they've just about been holding on. And the pattern is very much stark in terms of whether you're South Asia or Southeast Asia. And what's kind of at the core of how this process works, working in site protection, is making sure that we're building these teams that can learn and can adapt. The term adaptive management is used frequently to describe these cycles whereby decisions are made off the basis of it's strong worked information, evidence, and then appropriate actions are taken. And so this happens at a number of scales. Like as I mentioned before, we start with this threat assessment to guide us towards a clear strategy for the site, and then build in some sort of thematic areas of intervention. But then at a sort of a faster, more immediate operational pace, we need to be bringing in these types of cycles, like the one that's described there, in which, particularly with regarding the protection work, if patrols are taking place and there's an operation, that there's a rigorous process of identifying what the failures were in that, improvements being identified, then allowing experimentation, trialing of improvements before developing consensus and building a new standard operating procedure to sort of iteratively improve how we work. And what helps move that whole process along is having these very clear, well-defined, informative products, analytic products, reviews, etc. And that requires human capacity. It requires staff to manage the data, work it, convert it into a product which is going to inform the decision maker. And so in the sites that we work in or that we're supporting with partners, we're now investing more heavily in these people, in these analysts and counter-wildlife crime coordinators who can dig in, understand the nature of specific problems, examine the operations that took place and why they succeeded or failed, and you create products to guide decision makers off the back of that. So what we need in order to do that well is to be able to have well-managed, curated data from different sources, which is synthesized together. And so we use SMART primarily in all the sites that we work for patrol data. But what we found was, we lack a lot of key context when relying only on the on those observation data made by patrol teams. So Smart Profiles was developed to try and fill some of that void, and that's used very much to capture important narrative that comes from either debriefs or interviews with community members or in post-arrest interviews. And so that can provide, that can be structured within Smart Profiles, and then that can allow the analyst to explore some of the important context that gets missed when over just relying on patrol data alone. And an important part of this is making sure that we're measuring the right things to know if our intervention worked or not. So trying to shift away from reliance on input metrics like kilometers walked, snares pulled, etc., and to guide, help inform the decision makers better about whether certain interventions are working by looking at tightening up those kinds of metrics. So instead of snares pulled, we'd be looking at perhaps the ratio of snares that were, when they were pulled, they were already abandoned versus snares that were seized before they were being even deployed, or the ratio of successful to unsuccessful interceptions of poaching teams, for instance. But either way, making sure that what's being measured is directly connected with how we're envisaging our intervention to reduce those specific problems that we're trying to address. And we've trialed a number of things, particularly with tech in the sites that we've been working in. With regards to a lot of this work, it's geared around guiding the patrol team specifically in the park. We have tested certain systems to speed up that process using or a degree of automation, and we found it didn't work terribly well for us. So we've moved right back away from that, developed a different way of planning patrols based around the in-depth understanding of the way poachers move in the landscape, and then creating patrol routes based on that. And then one of the site analysts that's been working heavily in this has then developed some R script to speed up the ability to understand how long it's been since we've been in an important along an important route. So that there's a degree of acceleration of some routine tasks through the technology, but not the important thing there is it's empowering the analyst's ability to think rather than pushing it into automation too far. So a lot of the work revolves around patrol tactics and refinements, as I mentioned. And as part of that cycle of iterative improvement involves scenario training, trial and improvement of specific tactics to address particular poaching types. And to sort of aid that process, we have experimented with different sensors to increase the speed of detection of poaching incursions when they get into the park. So Panthera has developed its own camera for monitoring tigers. It developed its own poacher camera then for covert detection of poaching incursions. And it works well. But all I would say is with much of this discussion about technology and its application is that it works well to a certain point. So the original intention was to have a relatively large number of these cameras to cover a large number of access points to pick up poachers coming in. We had to massively downsize that estimate because of the time it takes to set up and camouflage well these cameras and then maintain them. And then, they get a heavy attrition from pigs, monkeys, the conditions of the jungle. And what we found more is that, as well, the time that gets sucked up with dealing with those cameras can sometimes be better placed in actually speaking to people and the communities. And the alerts that we've had from the communities can actually be a lot more powerful than the alerts that we've had from the cameras. So in a number of cases, we've had community members actually take us straight to the point last seen where they've seen a poacher go in. So we have some cameras around the landscapes. They are particularly useful in those areas where we don't have community contacts to work with. But I'd say we keep this sort of thing in balance, and making sure that all of this tech that gets brought in enhances the patrollers' skills and works with them. We've had a number of false starts with frustrations when some of it hadn't been adequately field tested before attempt to be deployed. So again, that's a few lessons learned there. And then the last point really is that as we sort of gone further along with this process, is realizing how vital those rural communities are, and that the resilience of those rural communities really kind of determines the resilience of the tiger population itself. That's discussed pretty commonly, regardless of where the protected area in the world is. But one kind of theme which is coming through loud and clear in Tiger Range, and I think which will be relevant to other large cat conservation programs, is the fact that livestock is a prelude to poaching. That the livestock predation by large felids can be the starting point for trade. The farmers retaliate, kill the cows, and then body parts make their way into market, and then that can escalate into established trade routes. And so what we've seen is working with farmers on the anti-predation side of things can reduce those frustrations that they feel when they lose income. And also it helps to create allies within the communities. They're perceiving some benefit from the direct benefit from the park there, as well as just experiencing loss and frustration. And so in a number of cases, they have actually then told us about the solicitation attempts from poaching teams moving in, looking for these conflict situations to address. But again, like in terms of making it work, the anti-predation work, this is a photograph taken from a cow in Costa Rica. And so this is a type of low-tech tech that we are going to trial with the tigers over in Malaysia and Thailand now. And it involves these we call them disco collars. So it's what the team found there is that in some of the farms where you have very low levels of husbandry and management of the cattle, and they just kind of roam around everywhere and go off into the bush, it's very hard to implement interventions like corrals and some of these enhanced management practices, which puts the burden on the farmer. So that team there really, again, took quite a problem-oriented approach. They go farm by farm and figured out, okay, what intervention is going to work for which farmer. And they found this works quite well for those farmers that really just let their cows roam. And it's a belt that goes around their neck and has a solar charger, and it charges up. And at night, then it will emit sort of all these crazy disco lights, which startle jaguars. And it's been so successful that all the farms that have taken this up have just seen predation rates just completely plummet. So that seems like, we need to write that up as a quick case study, but it's a great little example of a quite a tailored problem-oriented approach to a specific problem there. So just a quick run through of the work that we're doing. I'll finish at that point.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. For those of you who live and work across Africa, you can imagine all the shebeens having this. Take them off the cows and put them on your local pub. That'd be very, very cool. I'm going to introduce Mary Burak, who is a postdoc fellow at Brown University, recently finished her PhD, so he's in a little bit of shock still, so please give her space. Welcome, talking about Kenya.
Awesome, thanks. Hey, everyone. Okay, great. My name is Mary Burak. I'm a postdoc fellow based in Kenya. I'm affiliated with a number of NGO partners, one of which I'll present on today, Action for Cheetahs in Kenya, where I've newly partnered with them to help evaluate essentially their conservation programs. So I actually, I think it's really great that we're presenting day one in one of the first sessions. Really the overlying theme here is we have an organization that is doing a number of very different but still connected activities. I see really high potential, but we also have very limited capacity to change or even upgrade a lot of our protocols, which perhaps resonates with many of you. So my hope is that with what I present on today, we can start the brainstorming process, maybe even learn more about what EarthRanger or other tech can do to help maximize our capacity to upgrade, so to speak. So with that, just a bit of background in terms of how I at least approach this work. I am a spatial and molecular ecologist. So first and foremost, I'm really interested in asking questions about what's going on in a landscape. So that might look like basically asking where are habitat patches, where are they more or less conducive to movement, and also potentially monitoring, but also taking it a step further and also asking, well, out of all of that movement, how much actually results in mating and gene flow, and maybe patterns of which we see genetic connectivity, so to speak. Hopefully, just also saying that a lot of this can hopefully be species agnostic, maybe cater to some giraffe folks in the room as well, but we'll see. Yeah, and then also just wanted to do a quick shout out. I just finished my PhD, as mentioned, and it was focused on lions in central Kenya. Even though I'm not presenting on that per se, this is a big cat session, so if any folks have questions about the work that I did there, it was really focused on temporal space use in the landscape, primarily using collaring data. Great, so let's talk about ACK. ACK is a registered conservation program under the umbrella organization called CAL, Carnivores, Livelihoods, and Landscapes. As the name suggests, it primarily focuses on cheetah conservation, but as many of us are probably familiar in our work, that also bleeds over into habitat conservation and also conservation of species at large that coexist within the same ecosystem. ACK has a number of ongoing activities and conservation priorities. Some of their activities include their Cool Crafts initiative, so trying to find a way to bring sustainable income into communities that also exist alongside cheetah. So in my work from the ecology side, we're chasing down a number of crucial questions. To date, I think one of the most pressing is questions about how linear infrastructure currently impacts the cheetah population and will into the future. So as roads expand or even go from paved to tarmac, so higher density, higher speed, how is this impacting species movement and species connectivity? And also, is it altering what we know currently about corridor connectivity as well? I will say, to answer a lot of those questions, ACK does a lot of daily patrols and monitoring. Historically, it's been on paper, and they've only recently tried to start digitizing this. But even with that, the data that has been collected, it's been immediately translated into conflict mitigation strategy. So basically trying to figure out patterns of where are cheetah highly prevalent, where does that physically overlap with livestock presence, And if we can pick up on strong patterns, most of the strategies have been focused on installing predator deterrent lights at livestock bomas. In terms of, I believe, really promising activities that occur at ACK, and I also think potentially have a strong capacity to then be digitized and try to figure out some sort of system for real-time monitoring, one of which is the rabies vaccination campaign. This occurs annually. The goal is usually to vaccinate something along the lines of 5,000 domestic and stray dogs. This is intended to hopefully feed into a broader One Health campaign to basically minimize the prevalence of rabies or rabies spread, both amongst livestock, wildlife, and humans. There is really good recording of how this is executed, how many vaccines are administered and where. Again, I see some potential in bringing this to the next level and hopefully maybe trying to convert this into a monitoring program itself. So after the fact, where does rabies pop up in the future? In how many individuals or numbers of animals, et cetera? Can we figure out a way to monitor this in real time digitally? I think the other really promising activity that is going on with ACK is its plan to hopefully execute a national cheetah survey in the future. There's been a number of pilot studies conducted to optimize essentially what methods we will use, and this has been centered upon the use of scat sniffer dogs. Cheetahs are low density across large home ranges, and it is very difficult to track them, especially in Kenya, where about 80% of them exist outside of protected areas. So scat sniffer dogs have been really crucial in essentially identifying with a 96% success rate the presence of cheetah scat. So a lot of the methods that we've trialed include basically what is our search pattern on the landscape physically and how do we adapt that to terrain, weather, wind flow as well, things that could potentially throw off scent. The hope is that when this is executed, it is done hopefully well with some sort of application online. But again, hopefully with some planning, we can figure out a way forward. Yeah, so with that, I think, again, we have a number of different activities going on. And I think to date, our challenges are really low capacity to upgrade and digitize just about anything. We're a very small team of ecologists. We're not IT experts. And as you've just witnessed, even our communication and our PowerPoint slides are definitely ripe for updating. So, how can we break out of our day-to-day routine where we feel like we need to continue to be in the field and continue to monitor, and perhaps even have some guilt in taking time off with that, and figure out a way forward. Yep. And then also, basically, if we're dealing with such a cryptic species, something that's really challenging to monitor, if 80% of the population is in unprotected areas, it's quite difficult to collar them. A lot of them are quite shy. Some cheetah in protected areas have become habituated to humans, but our success rate for collaring and then also keeping those collars on is quite low. So what else can we do besides collars? We've tried camera trapping, but not extensively. But I have questions about, well, how can we potentially move this forward with non-invasive sampling, especially given our use of scat sniffer dogs? I'll keep it at that. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Mary. I'm going to invite you three folks, maybe if you can bring your chair and sit down here. And I think what we'll do is we'll open for questions to the audience. I'm sure there's many questions about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So please, is there any questions in the audience to start with? I don't know how we're going to get we'll start. How loud's your voice?
So, my name is Oliver. I'm working for...
Yeah.
Just go sit aside of the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Oliver. I'm from the SMART Partnership, but I'm also working in Namibia with the EarthRanger program up there. So I'm with lion conservation up there, and we face the same issues you see with tigers, with cheetahs and all these things. My question is more from the smart partnership or from my technology background. Did you ever thought about using an AI technology regarding predicting animal movement in regard of human-wildlife conflict? Like, if you have colored data, colored animals, did you ever envision something like, where are they in 2 or 3 days? Is there anything like a model available for that one? Because I'm actually working on something like that to integrate into smart and all this kind of color data.
Yeah, that's a really good point. For tigers, we don't have any of them collared really. It's very rare that we'd have collared data, but we can perhaps get some sense to make predictions about conflict likelihood based on the status of some of the individuals along the forest fringe. So we know that it seems like some of the females begin conflict when they have cubs to raise, obviously, and so getting a sense of, okay, what, if you can pick that female up in the cameras and see that she's pregnant, then we can anticipate, okay, there's going to be conflict emerging shortly. But I think that's a really important point. We have just been discussing in terms of like, how do we prioritize which farms are most vulnerable, what times are we most expecting conflict to emerge. The other key point that we've seen from our side is some of these kind of the influence on conflict of sudden prey loss. And so African swine fever went ripping through Asia recently, and what we've seen has been this kind of rise in cattle conflict along the fringes in the wake of that, because most of the prey for tigers in Malaysia is pigs. So you've knocked out like a chunk of the prey base. They've all switched into cattle. Yeah, really, really important point. I hadn't thought about the connection to smart before, but good one.
So something that's been on my mind is potentially using something like this. I don't know how consistent, but predictors, again, of future wildlife connectivity under different land management plans or even development plans. I think in my work, at least, development programs within Kenya are often talked about, but I have not seen often basically some sort of dialogue between those that are actually making those decisions and helpful conservation messaging. And I think part of that could potentially be some sort of predictor that does not take years with students to do, and lay out potential options of, if said development project has to occur, what are the different options, rather than just blanket hypotheses about how many wildlife might be impacted, yes or no. So that is something on my mind in terms of how could something automated help us. And I think that is like land management scenario modeling potentially.
So with our organization, we're tracking human-wildlife conflict incidents when they are reported to us or to the Nature Conservation Authority. So we're starting to gain a quite robust data set on where it's happening, when it's happening, and we're starting to pick some trends out, but they're really just anecdotal at the moment. So I feel like, for example, we're seeing leopards are often making more kills of livestock in the winter, but we haven't properly statistically tested that yet. So I feel like there is a lot of scope for us to start to use this data. We're also not sitting with collared individuals, but I feel like a lot of the information we have about leopard movement in the province could also maybe come into that. And in terms of predictive capacity as well, we are looking at leopard movement corridors and changes in the landscape as well, because what we're often seeing is that the leopards are often staying up in the protected areas within the Western Cape, which are often more rugged and mountainous areas. But with people and population expanding, we're pushing up the mountains basically, and our farms are going higher and higher. And if we can predict what's going to be happening in future with agricultural expansion and leopard movements, we can hopefully utilize those predictions to try and influence make suggestions as to which areas need to stop development and protect those areas from future activity because of the high risk of conflict that would come with that. So I think there's certainly conversations we could have about that.
Excellent. No, that all sounds very interesting. Any other questions I'll throw in or while I come to you? One thing I'm thinking about, you all talked about camera traps and different technologies. I'm going to try and squeeze through. We worked in, all of us work in different sectors and whatnot and see the good, the bad and the ugly of this technology. We can put people, on the moon. We can land things on Mars. Recognition software programs, how good are they for what you guys do in the different landscapes that you actually use them?
So we're currently not using them, but we hope to. So I think, I'm not sure if you're about to speak on the same, but essentially recognition software for IDing individuals, I think, has become extremely helpful. Again, especially if your chance at citing one is quite low, identifying them right in the first place is extremely helpful. So that, I hope, can be implemented in the future. But for those of you that do more intensive camera trapping, I'm assuming maybe you have more experience.
Yeah, so we found that using AI has really been a very clever move for us. Initially, when we moved into using a program to help us identify species, we had to do quite a bit of training with it because a lot of the training the program had done previously actually was with animals up in Namibia, and it's a very different landscape. It's a very different suite of animals as well. So it really didn't know animals in the fynbos. It had no idea what our little bockies were, and it also was just getting a little bit confused by our very different landscape. So we had a close relationship with the organization. We spent quite a long time pulling out a lot of our specific to the Cape species and running it with them so that they could gain the knowledge of the species in our terrain because they'd never worked in this part of the country much. And after that, we did find that after that investment, we have had a pretty good yield in terms of the quality of the ability of making the IDs correctly. We still get funny ones quite often, so incorrect IDs that you have to change and have a good laugh at, but it definitely has speeded us up and it's really made a much more efficient tool than doing it by hand. And the same with our Leopard ID program that we're using as well. We used to spend a very long period of time putting our two photos side by side and sort of almost, exceedingly slow looking at each one, matching each spot by eye. But, the tools that are available now for Leopard ID have really sort of advanced quite quickly. And we found that, Hotspotter was the go-to tool before, but it's even advanced from them. There's a lot more advanced algorithms now that are being incorporated into some of these programs. And we are finding quite a high level of accuracy in our work in terms of IDing.
I think that point about training the algorithm to pick up to identify what species is what is quite a time-consuming process that we've been going through with the system that we've been using. It's called Panthera IDS. I'm not sure if the team that's been developing it is now incorporating some of the AI, but that does sound quite promising if it can accelerate the identification. And I think the other side of it as well is perhaps the cameras being the one, and then sound detectors as well. That's another one where there's tremendous energy that needs to be spent on training the algorithm to identify those sound profiles to know what species is making what call, or the profile of a gunshot, for instance. So if there's AI that can help with accelerating that, then that would be useful. I don't know about that, but I know that one of our teams has been experimenting with sound detectors, and there's a lot of promise there because they're very low maintenance. You can leave them for 6 months, pick them up, and then you'll get a different kind of insight to what's going on in the forest from the patrols or from the cameras. But it's the back end processing of the data which is the big time suck. So.
Thank you. My name is Jessica Bailey. I work for Conservation International, and actually my question was very similar. It was targeted at you, Kathy, and I just wondered what percentage accuracy you're getting on your AI analysis on the individual recognition for the leopard.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure on that, to be honest, but I do have one of my colleagues I might just call on in the audience, Anita Wilkinson, who's the one who actually runs it every day. So if it's okay, I'm going to put her on the spot because she's the one who does the AI stuff for us a bit more.
Yeah. So you want to know percentage accuracy. It's difficult to say percentage accuracy because it gives you a value so you have to visually match it. It gives you a suggestion, but it's pretty accurate. It very rarely gives you a high value match when it's not the same individual. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's more accurate than humans. Especially with large data sets and when you go into new area, you don't have an ID kit for your animals, then to build an ID kit, it's much, much faster. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for your great talks, everyone. I wanted to ask you about a tool that's available for predicting where poaching might occur. And this is actually a tool called Protection Assistant for Wildlife Security. And there's a team in the Harvard University that's developed this tool. It's actually available as a plugin with Smart. And I was just wondering if, especially Rob, in Malaysia or in other places where you're working, has PAWS been successful in predicting places where poaching might occur and help to improve patrolling and the success rate of law enforcement?
Tony. We worked a bit with the team that developed that in the very early iterations of it, and I think I'm sure it's improved quite a lot since then. I think at that time when we were field running some of the initial outputs, it was really, really hard to make work. It was throwing the patrollers off. Everyone was getting quite frustrated with it, and that basically was what forced us to do a big rethink. Because basically what we would realize is we're kind of outsourcing some of the thinking about where patrollers are going and what they're doing to another group that has very little connection with the land, and so we were spending a lot of energy trying to explain to them about what the ground's like. Why we could just do this ourselves. So that's why we really started investing more in our own analytic capacity within our team. And then what we saw that pay off quite a lot when it started accelerating our own questions that we're asking about, okay, why are they making this decision and not that decision? So we ended up getting quite a good fine-grained understanding about what specific terrain features influence poacher movement patterns, which then fed into enhanced patrol deployments and enhanced search management strategies after the initial detections made. So yeah, we haven't really kind of gone back to that since then. Like now the map that we use to the risk map which determines where we schedule our patrols to and the frequency with which they go back to those key areas, we found works really well for us for this particular poaching type that we're dealing with. So I think we're going to stick with that one for the foreseeable.
Does anybody else have any questions? Just drop over there.
Hi, I'm Kim from Sabi Sands. I have a couple of questions actually. Katie, you using your trap cameras as surveys. We use trap cameras mostly for a security perspective, but to be able to conduct a survey, in how many cameras do you need in what kind of area to be able to get the data that you're getting?
So the answer to that very much depends on the habitat you're working in. So you'll have a very different story than we have here in the Cape because you have a higher amount of leopards moving around. You have a much more prime leopard habitat in some ways than we do over here. So when we're setting up surveys, we need to cover quite large areas because our leopards have such massive home ranges and we need to capture them multiple times in different locations. So we can't have a closely packed survey with our cameras quite sort of close together because we won't be able to pick up enough individuals within the space. But in a place like Sabi Sands, I think you guys would be able to have a very different survey style, something I think would be more similar to the type of approach that Panthera often does with their monitoring surveys, the leopard monitoring that they do across the country, where they set up cameras, I believe it's about 2 kilometers apart from each other, and using also a paired camera trap system would be the approach to go, so that you get both sides of the leopards. And if you are dealing with leopards that don't move quite as far, you can also have a much smaller survey area than we do. So, for example, the one I was talking about was over 3,000 square kilometers. It's huge. You guys might be able to go with something like 200 square kilometers or 300, something like that. So you need to work out your ratio and your spacing based on that. But I think I would suggest, looking into Panthera's leopard monitoring model, because I believe they've done quite a bit of monitoring in Sabi Sands already. So I think using that almost as your starting point would be advisable, rather than trying to invent the wheel from nothing. Like go from surveys that have been done in your area before and look for their advice.
Cool, thanks. And then I have a question for Rob as well. You were talking about your working with the farmers and the predation with the farming. From your guys' perspective, do you guys compensate the farmers if they are predated on?
No, we don't. And I think that's, my sense of it is, from speaking to others who've been more involved in that sort of community interface, is that it can become a bit of a tricky one to manage well, and that it's perhaps best if the compensation scheme is going to be done, is to have that run through the government authority. I think Mexico has a really good livestock loss compensation scheme, but I think there it's more like almost an insurance scheme that the farmers pay into it a small amount of money and then they get the payoff. But it needs obviously then the due verification team to go out and assess, check that there's no false reporting, etc. So no, we found mainly it's simple kind of just reassurance as being like number one, the key thing, just speaking to the farmers, and they say, oh yeah, actually someone's interested, because we found that this is a space where there's conflict between farmers and wildlife department, which prevents solutions being coming up, because they sometimes there's a degree of land encroachment, or there's a degree of tension between those groups. And so it's a space where an NGO can insert and work with the farmers, but even just a small amount of assistance in stock-proof fencing or sort of tiger-proof fencing, etc., can generate a tremendous amount of goodwill, that they perceive that someone is actually trying to do something, and then off the back of that we got more reporting. But obviously making sure that what these solutions that's being given then duly work, and it actually is reducing the kill rate of cattle is the key thing. So keeping those relationships going then with the farmers and tracking them over time. But yeah, it's a relatively new area that we're moving into now in the region. But it's been done really well in Costa Rica. So we're sort of trying to learn from those guys and their successes and how they made that work.
Last one, also sorry for Rob, is with your disco collars, as you called them. What was the percentage of the predation drop in the community?
It was in the specific ranches that trialed it. It was like almost 100%. Yeah, it was like night and day. That's why when the team trialed they'd originally sort of set out an experimental design. So they're having some ranches which were using the collars, others which weren't. But then because of the fact that the farmers that were receiving the collars were having such drastic losses of prey attacks, then the others kind of caught on and started requesting that they get moved out of the control category and then start receiving. So that's like an issue, like having your controls too close to your treatment groups, I guess. But it was kind of an indicator of how successful it was. But yeah, I guess the other point though as well, that kind of related, is kind of the making sure what the nature of the killing is, and the team in Brazil has what they found there with some of the anti-predation work. They use these massive, highly aggressive Spanish fighting bulls and put them into herds, and they will just take on jaguars and So they're quite a different intervention. But what they found is that, again, like a lot of the supposed jaguar killing is feral dogs, and I think that's probably going to be, we're going to see similar kind of issues in other parts of the range where, while feral dogs are a tremendous issue in different protected areas around the fringes, and they do kill certain livestock. So it might be a case of false reporting. So those kills do need to be checked.
Thanks.
So we're going to almost finish off. I just want to ask you each one last question. So moving forward, recommendations, conservation technology. Obviously, we're here, not specifically talking about EarthRanger, but what is the most exciting thing that you can think of or would like to have developed to help you guys and your work forward?
Okay, I'll go first. So I think some of the most exciting developments that I've been seeing has been sort of open source data sets that are freely accessible, that can be used, that provide different levels of clarity to the site. So half of what you need to understand some of the dynamics of the site and the communities is to have really high resolution of the infrastructure, but then also some of the different patterns that are going on. So now there's globally accessible data sets looking at human population density down to like 1 kilometer. You got the different livestock densities down to small scale pixels, and now tools like the Open Street Map for sort of ripping up data from satellite imagery. Because like what we found, one of the most important things was when we actually got the University of Montana to conduct in-depth, high-resolution mapping of the whole surrounds, and that tremendously improved our insights into the ground. So from my side, I'd say more of that, really, more things that can help us gain really good insights into sort of the conditions in and around the protected areas. And helping to sort of pull that data together, like fires, etc. But also like considering the human, the demographic side of things, and the economics, and factoring that into the understanding of the site. All right.
Yeah, I think basically to add on and even complement some of the stuff you've just pointed out, I would love to chat with folks and figure out a way, basically, how can we also incorporate genetic monitoring into this technology? Genetic monitoring is key to sometimes early disease detection, be it through direct testing or even non-invasively. Genetic monitoring is also really important for IDing individuals that you don't see often, IDing poached individuals, IDing source populations of illegal wildlife trafficking and poaching. And even moving forward, if you also expand genetic analysis to things like diet or parasites, also asking, moving forward with continued land use change and even climate change, are wildlife accessing their resources as we expect moving forward? Are they not? How can we, again, try to adapt to this? I think molecular ecology has been really siloed up until now. And with this technology boom, I think there's ample opportunity to figure out how can we add that almost as frequently, if not as frequently, as observational sightings, et cetera.
I want to just talk a little bit about human-wildlife conflict mitigation tools. And I feel like the tools that Rob spoke about, these simple tools that can have such a meaningful impact, is an area that I think for us in the Western Cape needs a little bit more development. So we have a landscape that's where the leopards are utilizing very rocky and very mountainous areas. You can't just easily plonk a corral on the ground that you can move and it's going to stay stable and keep a leopard out. We have high winds. We have snow in the Cedarburg. These are difficult conditions. So we're looking for us to have some sort of innovation that's really going to work for our quite harsh environment to reduce human-wildlife conflict. One of the ideas that we have actually is to work with engineers and try and create a mobile, predator-proof but affordable corral that is going to keep leopards who are climbers, who can go underneath, out, and also just deal with this really rough landscape we're sometimes dealing with. So trying to find innovation in our toolbox for our farmers as well that's really going to meet their needs. So loving the sharing that's already going on with ideas, but we're looking for more inspiration, more engineering minds to help us with those things.
Excellent. So join me in thanking very much Katie, Mary, and Rob. And enjoy the rest of the conference.